Now this NSA, I'll get to the second issue here, this is the burning issue of the day, is this kind of, they call it turnkey totalitarianism, that began a day or two after 9/11. That's when it began. Under the Bush, Cheney and Cheney's lawyer Addington, they said, and Michael Hayden, all had a meeting and they said, yes, up till now we have not had to spy on Americans, this between the Church Committee, and I should say not for all time, because the spying at the end of the Vietnam War was egregious. The NSA had a minaret program, the CIA had its chaos program, and the FBI had COINTELPRO. All of them kind of doing the same thing, but on different levels. The minaret program in the NSA, which was secret for 40-some years, just one document has come out about this now, spied on 1,650 Americans, not spied on, targeted 1,650 Americans. The one document that was released in September of this year disclosed 7 of the Americans. And the 7 were the 2 civil rights leaders, Martin Luther King and Whitney Young, journalists, a New York Times editor, Tom Wicker, Art Buchwald, I think was a Washington Post humorist, why he was spied on is crazy, and Muhammad Ali, because he was fighting the draft as a conscientious objector. And the other 2 are the most chilling of all. Back in the last 6 years of the Vietnam War, 2 of the main targets for the NSA's spying was Frank Church, 2 powerful senators, Frank Church and Howard Baker. There could have been more because this is only one document. There are 640 some Americans we don't know were spied on because that's still secret, still classified to this day. No whistleblower all that time has told us. So when this starts to happen again, right after 9/11, they have a secret meeting and they say, we're going to do it all over again. And we'll sanitize it and call it total information awareness. Now they start this, they turn on the faucets to do all the metadata collection of all Americans. That metadata collection is one of dozens of programs. They're all different. Some monitor the emails and the texts and the internet. Some monitor telephone, but there's dozens of these programs. And altogether, the whole thing was called Total Information Awareness. Well, about a year and a half into it, somebody believes that it's not a good thing to have this terrible secret that they're monitoring the whole world, collecting billions of pieces of data, and that somebody must have worried that when the American people find out, as they did with COINTELPRO, that we could be in trouble. So Poindexter, convicted Nixon felon, of course, it's not surprising that the Nixon people, including Cheney, who was a Nixon aide, it's not surprising that Poindexter and Nixon, that this comes out of, and the neocons themselves come out of the Nixon era, because this tremendous totalitarian secret government that was going on, including all kinds of illegal actions that Nixon was doing. So a lot of them are dead and deceased, but the ones who are still alive have continued on and or trained new sycophants in government. So they all devised this thing that we're going to do it all over again. And people say Cheney, of course, always resented the Church Committee. The people that lived through Nixon's being forced out and being humiliated, and then the new restraints put on during the Church Committee, resented it. They seethed all this time period that they could not have this powerful war president that would be able to make quick decisions. That's how they frame it, decisive. So now they get their chance, their new Pearl Harbor, and they make a decision among other things besides launching new wars. They make this decision to turn on the levers. And the best people in the NSA, one was a 36-year top mathematician for the NSA, William Binney, Wiebe, and Loomis, who had been working on ways to do the job of the NSA, which is actually to focus on real terrorists or foreign threats, but without collecting the data on innocent people and on innocent Americans. They had already devised a way to do this. they said, we can't be a part of this illegal, terrible Orwellian world, and they left. They left like the first month after 9/11 because they could see what was happening. And they then became retaliated against as being the whistleblowers. They weren't the sources for the leak in 2004 and 5 to the New York Times, but they were suspected of having been the sources because they had resigned or retired right away. So what happens is that goes on. They decide then to float it, and Poindexter floats it to the American public. There's a debate. You know, remember when they put out the little pyramid with the all-seeing eye? And it was supposed to be good propaganda that people were going to say, oh, that's going to protect us. If this all-seeing eye knows everything, I'll be protected. And actually, that time period was when people were probably most susceptible to fear, because we were still seeing repeat and repeat of the buildings falling. And so that was probably the time when it was most likely to be sold to the American people. But in fact, no. That there was an outcry and a backlash against total information awareness, and Congress was forced to defund the DARPA Total Information Awareness. And then people breathed a sigh of relief, we're fine, no, continue. Whatever all of the levers they turned on after 9/11 continued. There was absolutely no change at all in government, except the change is we realize we cannot float this and tell the American people at this time. So we go another couple years, and the New York Times hears from whistleblowers. They heard from Thomas Tam, who was a DOJ attorney, who didn't know what to do because it's completely unconstitutional what he's witnessing. And they heard from, I think, a couple others. So he had multiple sources, but that's all secret. Then what happened is when that came out in the New York Times, it was not enough. There sure was some public outrage, but it was not enough to reform. And what happened is they pushed through the FISA Amendments Act. The way this happened, because our Senator Klobuchar had just been newly elected that 2006, taken the oath of office that I will uphold the Constitution. What, 6 months later, not even 5 months later, 8 months later, I guess she takes the oath of office in January. In August of that year, before they go on a recess, about midnight, they are pressured by Michael Hayden to rubber stamp the illegal warrantless monitoring that's going on. Of course, this was just a couple years after that New York Times. That average progressives would have thought ended, right? Didn't end, and in fact, Klobuchar, who was elected by progressive, her base, I was the only one who wrote a Huffington Post saying she just violated her oath of office to go against the Constitution. And doesn't she realize, I didn't know at the time that Frank Church had been a target of the NSA spying, but I assumed that eventually it would catch up even with Congress. So I even wrote, don't you realize you're going to be monitored? That what you have just signed on in your bill for emergency power for the NSA to continue this is going to be turned on you. Do you not get that? So I wrote a Huffington Post, very strong. Most of the Democrats in our district went with Klobuchar. To this day now, the Democrats will not even click like when I post things against NSA spying. A lot of them don't, because they're kind of in this blind loyalty to Obama. And if he says it's good, then it's necessary to protect me, I'll go with it. So that was the first time I actually went against Amy Klobuchar, because she had voted for it. Well, that temporary power that they gave then became the FISA Amendments Act in 2008. And they gave immunity for all the illegal things that they had been doing. They expanded and allowed and authorized, or what I call legalized at the time, because it had been illegal up till then, but they legalized this massive spying that went on in 2008. Just quickly finish with this history of the NSA thing, because it's important to know how this all works, because there's been so much false narrative out there. One of the narratives is we've never had a debate about this. Not exactly right. We had a debate with the total information awareness being floated and roundly lost. So there was a debate already. This is actually the second, and actually there was a little bit of a debate when the New York Times ran its expose. Many people think if that expose had come out in time that Bush would not have been reelected. And if Bush had not been reelected and there had been accountability for the unconstitutional actions, Obama would not have fallen under the pressure that he had to go along with it. If you look at how history develops. But all along, the people have not been strong enough, as FDR said, to make me do it. And we're hoping right now with the Snowden disclosures that have come out that finally people, and of course lots of organizations, lots of ACLU type and Electronic Frontier Foundation types are going to have now a little bit more public, the ability to get the public to fight back. By the way, February 11th is called Fight Back Day. And it's being led by a lot of these civil liberties groups. I don't know exactly what's planned. I just went online, I found Fight Back Day, and I signed up. So that's another thing people can do right away on the NSA. Join a group. You know, unless you are a great writer on your own, you're writing letters to the editor and you don't do well in meetings, but typically you can do more in a group. And so I would say get involved, join the Fight Back Day on February 11th for starters, and keep this pressure on now. The reason for the speech that Obama gave on Friday to basically say, reassure Americans that I'm working on this, and it was a mild self-criticism that he kept saying there's a potential for abuse. We haven't abused any rights. I don't think that that's necessarily the case because there's some indications that they have already abused rights, but he says it's a potential and that, you know, I welcome the debate and here are these proposed fixes. One is just one program, the metadata, which won't be held necessarily by the government. It'll be held by another entity. Another proposed fix is to have, from time to time, if there's an important issue before the secret FISA court, it wouldn't be most court orders. It would just be maybe even once a year when they have an important issue before the FISA. We'll have some lawyers that will secretly appear. Well, that's a very minor. I'm not against that. I think it's a fine idea. But if you understand how secrecy works, even good people in a secret system, including all of those FISA judges, most of the FISA judges have gone along with this. There have been times when a FISA judge has spoken out, but then they've gotten hit back. And so secret systems, so if you even bringing in people that to be on the other side or to be objective, it's not going to work. It's not going to have the intended effect. So it's a good idea, it's not bad, but the key is to reduce the secrecy. Mm-hmm. And it's very simple. The fixes for the NSA, there may be 3 or 4, and they're all very simple. You would never hear this out of Obama's mouth, that a way to truly fix and reform this massive spy machine that's going on right now that is collecting info on Americans as well as foreign threats and actually hurting the ability of the intelligence and law enforcement to find a terrorist. None of the terrorist attacks in the United States in recent history have been detected by the metadata collection system. None. They lied initially and said there were 50-some, but none of them have. The Boston brothers in Boston were actually tipped off to by the Russian government, and they were not investigated. The underwear bomber, his own father called the State Department. He was not investigated. Major Hassan was in direct contact with what we claim to be the top terrorists on the kill list, al-Awlaki. He had 7 or 8 or more exchanged emails. And so if this metadata collection was working, you think that they would have been able to prevent his shooting 14 people on the base, right? If the metadata collection, if all of the intelligence was working, you'd think they would have had a stronger case on who was responsible for the sarin attack. This is incredible. You know, maybe 500 people died in that sarin attack. And to this day, they don't know who did it. And what the government put out, that they had strong evidence of Assad's forces based on their intelligence, is not true at all. Just read what Cy Hirsch has written. And I've actually been working on this too. It's not true at all. Well, if this worked, if our intelligence massive collection worked, we would be able to do what Bush and Obama constantly said it could do. No. It's hurting the efforts. It's actually making it harder to connect the dots because right now there's maybe 15, 16 trillion pieces of data in this massive computer, mostly on innocent and almost all of it is non-relevant data that just clutters and clogs up and allows when Abdul Muttalib's father calls in, when the Russian government gives us a tip, it covers that up like a haystack would, and you're adding hay to it. So, there's like 4 things that need to be done. 1, reduce the secrecy. Very simple, easy to do to reduce the secrecy. In a normal criminal investigation, like when I worked in New York City on the mafia, those investigations were secret for a pretty long period of time. Some investigations need to be secret only for a month, maybe for a year. A year would actually be kind of a long one. You would never tell, even a bank robber, usually it's a week. So once somebody calls in and says, I spot that person, it looks like your photo, those would only be secret for a day or 2 in order to get the person arrested. Okay, so some are very short. Some with organized crime might be longer, couple, 3 years even. But there's a big difference between temporary secrecy that's necessary for a short time period, or even a couple, 3 years. And they could certainly do this with the terrorist groups that only have a handful of people in them. And some are very small, they're dangerous, but there could be a very small, the Sarnoff brothers was just 2 people. Okay, so you would ask the court for a limited secrecy, just like they call it sneak and peek. They give you a limited, they sign off saying, yes, you can have 1 year. You have this tip on the 2 brothers. I give you 2 years, 1 year of secrecy. Okay, fine. That right off the bat wouldn't be enormous in government. You would not have something like the Minaret program secret for 43 years. And when you're operating in law enforcement, you know that all of your work, your affidavits, the tape recordings, if you were listening in as we were with the mafia, you know that every one of these is going to go to a defense attorney and to a judge and to a jury. And when they get to go through them, they're going to examine your work. And if you made a mistake and the I's were not dotted and the T's were not crossed, you're going to be held to account in a court of law. Okay, huge difference, huge difference. That's actually why due process in the 800 years of the Magna Carta exists. It exists because it works, and you're very accurate. Yes, you make mistakes even in that system, but at least you're a lot more accurate. Reduce secrecy. You change it so that you're focused, not this indiscriminate bulk collection, willy-nilly, everything goes in and then later we'll sort it out. No, you focus based on levels of suspicion, based on the intrusiveness. So for a third-party record, you don't need actual probable cause. You see this mentioned all the time. That's for a search of your house or to arrest you that you need probable cause. That's actually a higher standard. The low standard is called reasonable suspicion, and it's very low. For a grand jury subpoena, it only needs to be relevant to a case. But what the NSA is doing isn't relevant even to a case. It's not even the lowest of the low standards. It doesn't even satisfy relevancy. It's a pretty incredible concept to realize that the law, as it's evolved over hundreds and thousands of years, because it works, is that you need to focus a little bit. Because if you have a complete bulk dragnet thing, you're just going to be, Now, the other part of this, besides the focus, it needs to be put back on track in terms of targeting and focus. Reduce the secrecy. The other thing is we need oversight. And so right now, with the way it's running in a complete secret system, when Obama promised Angela Merkel that he wouldn't be spying on her, she has no way of knowing if this is true or not, unless there's another Edward Snowden. Well, they don't need to have undisclosed, unauthorized disclosures if they set up people with the skills to actually audit. So we have audits in everything, right? Because things can run amok all the time if you don't periodically audit to ensure. It's going to have to be people like these NSA whistleblowers, these top mathematics geniuses that know exactly how to look at computer systems. They would have to be, not what Obama's suggesting. His panel that he has come up with is his own White House counsel, John Podesta, who is actually part and parcel of some of this. So the panels he's talking about before when Bush had a Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, this was for 10 years hampered. So they find ways to hamper these. It can't be hampered. It has to be a real audit. That's the third suggestion. Very easy to do. And the fourth thing is reducing the corruption. Because the corruption that has really fueled this is basically what Eisenhower warned of, the military-industrial complex. Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a national surveillance equivalent of Lockheed, SAIC, all of these quasi-military surveillance spy companies, 2,000 of them, by the way, there's 2,000 private contractors, have been making hand-over-fist money. Since 9/11, the estimate now is that the cost, and again, this is extremely corrupt because it's a revolving door. People like Michael Hayden, who was NSA director, who decided to turn this on as soon as he was, Bush, he left NSA, then he went back to I don't know what group, he's Chertoff group, or Booz Allen, I think, maybe it's even Booz Allen. He goes right back as a private contractor. The salaries of the top level people that are going through revolving door, generals, usually are in the 7 figures. So they're not getting like 150,000. There's at least 7-figure salaries, which is coming out of government taxpayers' money. Then he was there for a while. Then he was named CIA director. He's gone back and forth. Well, that's not an unusual story. This is what's going on. And so this is an unbridled corruption. There's actually an Office of Government Ethics rule that completely prohibits this. That because you're not supposed to work on programs that you dealt with in the public sector. There's supposed to be a waiting period of at least 2 to 5 years. So there's, but this rule is not being enforced at all right now. And so there's a huge, terrible corruption. That would have to be fixed. And that's going to be a little tougher because right now you're dealing with some very big money. They estimate a minimum of $500 billion since 9/11 has been spent merely on this private contractor, top secret America stuff. Maybe closer to an entire trillion that's already been spent on this. So they're making hand, and that's what's fueled it. Exactly what Eisenhower warned of. And actually, the day Obama gave his speech, that was the 53rd anniversary of Eisenhower's speech warning of the military-industrial complex. Exact same day. We have a chance now. We have an opportunity. It's kind of hard to see the harsh reality and to know the truth. I mean, Martin Luther King Day, the sad thing is you can see how Martin Luther King himself becomes very sad in the last year or two when he kind of realizes that, how really bad this is. But that shouldn't, the understanding the truth and that you can't trust many of the figures, many of the politicians in government now, that shouldn't deter people from acting. Okay, just because a lot of people think, oh, I lose my hope if I see it's this way. There's a constant argument. I don't want to know because I want to keep hopeful and optimistic. Well, we should still be very optimistic. All of the fixes to the NSA spying are very easy to do. The Church Committee, once they took a year, I think their hearings went on for a year, and once they found out a lot of the horrible truth of what had been going on under Nixon, they were able to fix it. They did rein it in. And it worked really pretty well all of that period of time. Don't be shy on talking. Don't be shy on Facebook. Don't self-censor. One more point to make. One of the other reasons for doing all of this extensive monitoring is to make activists self-censor in their communications. So immediately, they're hoping that the Catholic worker, who have been listed many times now as being spied on, Catholic worker groups have been listed, and there's been revelations that they've had. I think it was in Philadelphia already 4 or 5 years ago that the FBI was sending infiltrators into meetings and things. Well, actually, it's just the opposite. What I tell people is, yes, it's true. We're all being spied on. That's true. However, use it as a teachable moment, okay? Assume that maybe somebody who's reading your Facebook posts or whatever, maybe they're teachable. Maybe they're people like Edward Snowden. There are good people in government too, and that they don't want to go down this route. So always use it as a teachable moment, explain everything, and do what we can. It shouldn't be secret anyways. We should all be out in the open acting, you know, nonviolent actions, but we need a lot more people to get brave. As Julian Assange of WikiLeaks said, courage is contagious. Well, they want to end courage. That's why there's draconian prosecutions. They want to end people's courage. No, we need people, everyone, from everyone who just reads a newspaper article to write a comment, to go public. Don't keep it to themselves. Go public. If you are in a position to talk publicly, do that. Write. If you're a writer, write letters to the editor, write op-eds. Even good people I know who are great writers will not write op-eds. And I can't quite understand this. Well, I'm afraid they won't publish me, etc. It doesn't matter. Try. If you don't get published in the Des Moines Register or our Minneapolis Star-Tribune, I've been turned down. I write op-eds all the time. And when I get turned down, I just go to the next newspaper. And if I get two or three newspapers turning me down, then I publish myself online on Huffington Post or someplace else. That's what you do. You go and try to reach the widest audience possible. Yeah.